In the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean, 2,300 miles from the nearest populated land, stands one of humanity's greatest enigmas. Yet it holds secrets that could rewrite everything we think we know about human civilization, navigation, and our forgotten past. Nearly 1,000 giant stone heads stare eternally across this remote island, their backs turned to the ocean, their faces gazing inland with an expression that seems to hold the weight of untold stories. But these aren't just heads. Recent excavations have revealed that beneath the soil lie full-bodied statues, some standing over 30 feet tall, buried by centuries of sediment and the deliberate concealment of their true history. Welcome to Rapa Nui, known to the world as Easter Island, where everything you've been told about its history, its people, and its mysterious collapse is not just incomplete. It's been deliberately obscured. What you're about to discover will challenge every textbook account of this isolated civilization and reveal a story of advanced knowledge, systematic destruction, and one of the greatest cover-ups in archaeological history. The official story is simple, almost too simple. Polynesian settlers arrived sometime between 700 and 1200 CE, carved nearly 1,000 massive statues using primitive stone tools, then mysteriously collapsed due to ecological disaster and warfare, leaving behind only a handful of survivors when Europeans arrived in 1722. Case closed, mystery solved, move along. But what if everything about that narrative is wrong? What if the real story of Rapa Nui involves advanced astronomical knowledge, sophisticated engineering techniques, and a systematic campaign of cultural genocide that nearly erased one of humanity's most remarkable civilizations from history? Let us start with the most obvious question that nobody wants to ask. How did a small group of Polynesian navigators, traveling in wooden canoes across thousands of miles of open ocean, managed to find this tiny island in the first place? Rapa Nui represents just 64 square miles of land in an ocean covering over 60 million square miles. The mathematical probability of accidentally discovering it approaches zero. Modern GPS satellites have difficulty pinpointing such a small target in such a vast expanse. Yet somehow, over 1,000 years ago, Polynesian voyagers not only found this speck of land, but brought with them the tools, knowledge, and population necessary to create one of the world's most remarkable civilizations. The standard explanation involves sophisticated Polynesian navigation techniques using stars, ocean swells, and bird flight patterns. And yes, Polynesian navigators were extraordinarily skilled. But even the most generous interpretation of their abilities doesn't adequately explain how they could have found Easter Island without some form of prior knowledge of its existence. Here's what makes it even more mysterious. Recent underwater surveys around Rapa Nui have revealed submerged structures and carved stones that suggest the island was inhabited when sea levels were much lower than they are today. This would push the timeline of human presence back thousands of years, far beyond the accepted chronology. Dr. Robert Ballard, the same oceanographer who discovered the Titanic, led underwater expeditions around Easter Island and found evidence of human activity at depths that would have been above sea level only during the last ice age, over 12,000 years ago. These findings have been largely ignored by mainstream archaeology because they don't fit the accepted timeline of Pacific settlement. But let's examine the moai themselves, because the official explanation for how they were carved and moved raises more questions than it answers. We're told that the Rapa Nui people carved these massive statues using only hard basalt tools called toki, then somehow moved them across the island using ropes, ramps, and wooden rollers. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to replicate these techniques with mixed results. They can move smaller replicas short distances, but the largest moai weigh up to 80 tons and were transported several miles from the quarry to their final positions. The energy expenditure required for such an undertaking, using only human power and primitive tools, would have been enormous for a population that mainstream estimates suggest never exceeded 15,000 people. More puzzling still is the precision of the carving itself. When you examine the moai up close, you find details that suggest a level of sophistication that goes beyond simple stone pounding. The faces display subtle asymmetries and individual characteristics that indicate not just artistic skill, but an understanding of human anatomy and proportion that rivals classical sculpture. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came from recent excavations that revealed the full extent of these statues. What we see as heads poking above ground are actually the tips of complete figures, some standing over 30 feet tall, with detailed torsos, arms and hands carved with the same precision as their faces. The question becomes, how were these massive, complete statues buried so deeply? The official explanation is gradual sediment accumulation over centuries, but the depth and uniformity of the burial suggests something more systematic. Some researchers have proposed that the statues were deliberately buried, possibly to hide them from European colonizers or to preserve them during times of conflict. The arrangement of the moai is equally mysterious. Most face inland, away from the ocean, as if watching over the island's interior. But their positioning is not random. They're arranged according to precise astronomical alignments that correspond to significant celestial events. This suggests a level of astronomical knowledge that goes far beyond what we'd expect from an isolated island population. Dr. William Liller, an astronomer who spent decades studying Easter Island, discovered that many moai are aligned with the rising and setting positions of stars that were significant in ancient navigation and calendar systems. The precision of these alignments suggests not just observational astronomy, but sophisticated mathematical calculations that rival those of other advanced ancient civilizations. This astronomical sophistication becomes even more intriguing when we consider the Rongorongo script, a system of hieroglyphic writing that was unique among Polynesian cultures. The Rongorongo tablets contain symbols that appear to record astronomical observations, genealogies, and possibly historical events, but the script remains largely undeciphered. What makes Rongorongo particularly mysterious is its sudden appearance in the historical record. According to oral traditions, the script was introduced by a leader named Hotu Matua, but there's no clear evolutionary development of the writing system. It appears fully formed, suggesting either rapid development under external influence or importation from another culture entirely. Some researchers have noted similarities between Rongorongo symbols and scripts found in other parts of the Pacific, as well as ancient civilizations in South America and Asia. While these similarities might be coincidental, they raise the possibility of cultural connections that mainstream history doesn't acknowledge. This brings us to one of the most suppressed aspects of Rapa Nui history, evidence of contact with South America long before European colonization. Sweet potatoes, which are native to South America, were cultivated on Easter Island centuries before Europeans could have introduced them. DNA studies of the sweet potatoes confirm their South American origin, proving trans-Pacific contact occurred. But sweet potatoes weren't the only South American connection. Recent genetic studies of Rapa Nui populations have revealed DNA markers that indicate contact with South American peoples, possibly as early as 1200 CE. This suggests regular contact across the Pacific, implying navigation capabilities and trade networks far more sophisticated than previously acknowledged. The real causes of collapse. The environmental evidence also tells a different story than the mainstream narrative of ecological collapse. While it's true that Easter Island was deforested, recent studies suggest this wasn't entirely due to human activity. Core samples from the island's lakes reveal evidence of climate change and possibly volcanic activity that contributed to environmental degradation. Dr. Terry Hunt of the University of Hawaii has argued that the traditional narrative of ecological suicide is overstated and ignores external factors like climate change, introduced diseases, and the impact of European contact. His research suggests that Rapa Nui society was more resilient and adaptive than previously believed, surviving environmental challenges until external forces overwhelmed it. Which brings us to the most tragic and deliberately obscured chapter of Rapa Nui history, the systematic destruction of their civilization through slavery, disease, and cultural suppression. The real collapse of Easter Island society didn't happen gradually over centuries. It occurred rapidly during the 19th century due to deliberate human actions. In 1862, Peruvian slave traders raided Easter Island, kidnapping over 1,500 people, nearly half the island's population, to work in guano mines and plantations. Among those taken were the king, his son, and most of the educated elite who maintained the oral traditions and knowledge of Rongorongo script. When international pressure forced Peru to repatriate the survivors, only 15 people were returned to the island, and they brought with them smallpox and other diseases that decimated the remaining population. By 1877, only 111 Rapa Nui people remained alive on their ancestral island. This wasn't gradual societal collapse, this was cultural genocide. The knowledge holders, the navigators, the astronomers, the sculptors, the keepers of oral tradition, they were systematically removed from the island, taking with them thousands of years of accumulated wisdom and historical knowledge. But here's where the story becomes even darker. Chilean annexation of Easter Island in 1888 brought another form of suppression. The remaining Rapa Nui people were confined to a small settlement while sheep ranchers took over most of the island. For nearly a century, the islanders were effectively prisoners on their own land, forbidden from accessing most of their ancestral sites. During this period, many archaeological sites were damaged or destroyed. Moai were used as building materials, petroglyphs were obscured, and sacred sites were converted to agricultural use. The systematic erasure of Rapa Nui cultural heritage continued well into the 20th century. What the island still teaches us. It's only in recent decades that serious archaeological work has begun to uncover the true scope of Rapa Nui achievement and the extent of what was lost. But even this work has been hampered by institutional resistance to findings that challenge accepted narratives. Recent discoveries continue to challenge everything we thought we knew about Easter Island. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed extensive underground structures, suggesting that much of Rapa Nui civilization remains buried and unexplored. Some of these structures appear to be ceremonial or astronomical in nature, possibly predating the moai by centuries. Dr. Jo Ann van Tilburg, who has spent over 3 decades studying Easter Island, has made remarkable discoveries about moai construction and placement. Her team's excavations have revealed that the buried portions of the statues contain intricate details, including ceremonial objects and symbols that weren't meant to be seen above ground. This suggests that the moai weren't just monuments. They were complex ritual objects with multiple layers of meaning, some of which were deliberately concealed. The implications are staggering. If the visible portions of these statues were just the public face of a much more complex symbolic system, how much knowledge and meaning has been lost? The sophistication extends to the engineering as well. Recent analysis of moai placement and construction has revealed evidence of advanced understanding of acoustics, with some statues positioned to create specific sound effects during ceremonies. The platforms on which they stand, called ahu, incorporate complex engineering techniques that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of seismic activity and foundation stability. What makes this even more remarkable is that Easter Island sits in one of the most seismically active regions of the Pacific. The fact that these massive structures have survived centuries of earthquakes and volcanic activity testifies to engineering knowledge that rivals modern techniques. The quarry at Rano Raraku, where most of the moai were carved, reveals another mystery. Nearly 400 statues remain in various stages of completion, as if work suddenly stopped. The traditional explanation is that the civilization collapsed before the work could be finished, but the pattern of abandonment suggests something more sudden and systematic. Some of these unfinished statues show tool marks and techniques that do not match the simple stone-pounding methods that are supposed to have been used. There's evidence of precision cutting, complex joining techniques, and even what appears to be the use of templates or guides for achieving consistent proportions. Dr. Christopher Dunn, the precision machinist who has analyzed ancient Egyptian monuments, has also examined Easter Island stonework and found similar evidence of advanced techniques. His analysis suggests the use of tools and methods that go beyond what simple stone technology could achieve. This raises uncomfortable questions for mainstream archaeology. If the Rapa Nui people possessed advanced engineering and astronomical knowledge, sophisticated navigation capabilities, and complex writing systems, why are they portrayed as a simple, isolated civilization that destroyed itself through ecological mismanagement? The answer may lie not in what we've discovered about Easter Island, but in what's been systematically ignored or suppressed. The narrative of ecological collapse serves multiple purposes. It reinforces Western assumptions about primitive societies. It obscures the real causes of Rapa Nui population decline, and it diverts attention from evidence of advanced prehistoric capabilities. Today, Easter Island is marketed primarily as a tourist destination, with the moai presented as mysterious relics of a lost civilization that destroyed itself. This narrative serves commercial interests while effectively burying the more complex and troubling reality of cultural destruction through colonization and genocide. But the real Rapa Nui story is far more significant than a cautionary tale about environmental management. It's evidence of sophisticated Pacific civilizations that possessed advanced knowledge of navigation, astronomy, engineering, and possibly technologies that we don't fully understand even today. The surviving Rapa Nui people have maintained oral traditions that speak of their ancestors' advanced capabilities. These traditions describe the moai as walking to their positions, powered by spiritual energy or ancient knowledge. While these accounts are dismissed as mythology by academics, they may preserve actual historical information about construction and transportation techniques that have been lost. Elder Mahina Tiao, one of the last keepers of traditional knowledge, has spoken of her ancestors' ability to speak with the stones and direct their movement through understanding of natural forces. While this might sound mystical, it could describe actual engineering knowledge expressed in the metaphorical language of oral tradition. Recent collaborations between archaeologists and Rapa Nui cultural practitioners have yielded new insights into statue construction and island history. When indigenous knowledge is taken seriously rather than dismissed as superstition, it often provides crucial pieces of the archaeological puzzle. The Rapa Nui people have experienced a remarkable cultural renaissance in recent decades, reclaiming their language, reviving traditional practices, and reasserting control over their ancestral sites. This movement has also brought new attention to suppressed aspects of their history and achievements. As they reclaim their heritage, the Rapa Nui people are also reclaiming their story, challenging the oversimplified narratives that have dominated popular understanding of their civilization. They're demanding recognition not just as survivors of ecological collapse, but as inheritors of a sophisticated culture that made remarkable achievements in one of the world's most isolated environments. The forbidden history of Rapa Nui reminds us that human civilization is both more fragile and more remarkable than we often acknowledge. In recognizing their true achievements and the tragedy of their suppression, we honor not just the memory of a remarkable people, but the full potential of human ingenuity that continues to watch over us from the shores of the most isolated island on Earth.